The movie starts with a shy boy named David, who lives in a small town. One day he gathers his courage to talk to Millie, a beautiful girl in his class, hoping to be more than just classmates. David gives Millie a snow globe as a gift, but Mark, another classmate, takes it away and teases David. Despite Millie's warning, David tries to retrieve the snow globe when Mark throws it into a frozen lake. He reaches the globe and smiles at Millie, but the ice breaks and David falls into the lake. David is pulled by the water and can't easily come back up. Suddenly, he finds himself in a cold, wet library, feeling confused. He tries to leave without anyone noticing. When he gets home late, his dad, William, sees him. David doesn't say where he's been. William gets mad and chases him to his room, trying to get in. Just as William is about to enter, David teleports back to the library. He realizes this new skill could make his life better. With many options thanks to teleporting, he decides to move to a bigger city and start fresh. David practices in a park to improve his skills. He reads a travel magazine and tries to teleport to different tourist spots. When he sees the Empire State Building, he remembers his mom, Barry, being there. Suddenly, things in his room start flying around and he teleports to the Empire State Building. He realizes he can only teleport to places he's been before. He gets an idea to become rich quickly, so he visits a bank and asks to use the restroom. Along the way, he spots the bank's vault. David goes into the vault at night by teleporting. He grabs lots of cash each time he comes back, filling his backpack. The next day, Roland Cox arrives and tells the bank manager he works for the government. He asks for all the camera footage and the names of everyone who was in the bank. The previous month, Roland points out that the bank vault had never been unlocked, and that the robbery's method of execution was unknown to the authorities. Roland suggests that a person who teleports may have been responsible for the robbery. A few years go by, and David now resides in an expensive apartment in downtown New York. David has an extravagant life, having everything he needs and doing whatever pleases him. Pictures of various places across the world are all over his flat, and he even has a hidden area where he saves cash from different countries. When David arrives at a London bar, he teleports there and notices a stunning woman. He quickly teleports beside her, not thinking that a person named Griffin sees him. After spending the night with her, he leaves for Fiji the next day in order to surf some really big waves. After that, he travels to Egypt and eats lunch atop the Sphinx. Meanwhile, in another scene, a man is seen running away. He's also a teleporter and tries to use his abilities, but a cable attached to him prevents him from doing so. Roland then appears and approaches him. The man asks Roland why he is hunting him, and Roland responds that for no reason, all people like him must be eliminated. He then silences the man forever. Then he gets a call about the bank robbery that happened a few years ago. Back to the present, David cheerfully enters his room. When he sees the unfamiliar face of Roland, he asks him to leave, but Roland explains that he's investigating the case regarding a certain bank robbery. Then he smacks David and electrocutes him. David immediately tries to teleport away, but he only gets a few meters. He tries running away, but Roland shoots a cable and binds him to the ground. This limits his teleportation abilities up to a few meters only. As David struggles in vain to get away, he manages to cut the line and teleport to a secret area in the wall. With the line cut off, he appears in his old room at his father's house. William immediately goes to David after hearing the noise in his room. He is shocked to see him again, suddenly appearing out of thin air. He begs him to stay, but he just teleports again. When David goes looking for Millie the next day, he discovers that she works at a nearby bar. Then he runs into Mark, the bully from his previous school, and they fight. After that, Mark is left in a bank vault by David, who teleported him there. He then gets back to Millie to have a talk. David asks Millie how she's doing in the little town and informs her that he works in banking now. When Millie confesses she still has dreams of traveling the world, David proposes taking her to Rome. After hearing this, Millie is overjoyed and informs David that she would really like to travel. Griffin is looking intently from behind them. A few hours later, David and Millie are visiting the Colosseum in Rome. In the meantime, Roland approaches Mark outside a police station by posing as an agent of the CIA. When he questions him about what transpired in the bank, Roland finds out about Millie and discovers that she has recently arrived in Rome. At a flat in Rome, David and Millie are talking about their lives and how they have grown over the past few years. Following their passionate kiss, David and Millie have a romantic moment. David brings Millie into the Colosseum later that day, and the two of them wander around while dodging guards. David eventually runs into Griffin after separating from Millie to unlock a bar door. Griffin says he can teleport too, calling himself and others who were able to do so jumpers. The gang of people known as Paladins are out to kill all jumpers. Griffin warns David, calling him out on his rich and carefree lifestyle, that it will only attract the enemy. A couple of Paladins appear, and as he is explaining, a fight breaks out as the Paladins advance and use their batons. When David tries to flee, one of the electrical cords catches him once more, and his teleportation power is activated. Griffin then engages in combat with the two Paladins, swiftly subduing them. He tells David that he has been fighting Paladins for a long time and disables both of his pursuers. After that, he teleports off to his hidden hideout. David follows after spotting what is known as a jump scar by Griffin. After receiving a warning from Griffin, David goes back to Millie. After that, Millie is taken by David and ushered outside the Colosseum, and she demands to know why this is happening. The police then come and capture David. David admits to breaking the law as a tourist and is apologetic when questioned at the police station. Afterward, the officers instruct David to await the U.S. Embassy magistrate. Just then, a woman she has not seen for so long comes to her. It's her mother, Mary. David receives a key to his handcuffs from Mary, who informs him he has just 30 seconds left before different Paladins show up. David follows Mary as she quickly leaves again, but he loses sight of her. David breaks the news to Millie at the airport. They must part ways. This depresses Millie, but she still decides to fly alone. Roland reveals himself as an IRS agent when he gets to William's house. William is unfriendly and uncooperative when Roland inquires about David. "I have not seen David in 8 years," says William. He talks about how David turned 5 when Mary abandoned him and David. Roland declines William's request for him to go. When David gets to Griffin's hiding place, he finds that his walls are covered in images and facts about Paladins all across the world. Griffin is asked by David to explain why Paladins are killing jumpers. Griffin adds that the conflict dates back to the Dark Ages. Griffin claims that the Paladins are fanatical religious people who think that only God should have the ability to teleport. Then he informs David that Paladins will kill everyone to get to David. No questions asked. After teleporting to William, he finds him paralyzed on the floor. David realizes that his father and Millie might be in danger. Medical staff come to William's aid as he moves them to a hospital. Returning to Griffin's hideout, David wants to learn more about Roland because he plans to defend himself and his loved ones. Griffin claims it's pointless because he's been pursuing Roland for over 10 years and keeps even more wounded. David offers to assist in apprehending Roland, but Griffin declines. After that, Griffin teleports to China, but David follows, attempting to persuade Griffin to accept his offer. Griffin eventually gives up when David informs him that in relation to Millie, he knows where Roland might show up next. They choose to part ways, with Griffin going back to the hiding place to gather his weapons while David goes to retrieve Millie. When David gets to Millie's apartment, she is surprised to see David again. Millie informs him that she no longer wants to do anything with him. David hears Roland and a few other men approaching. Despite Millie's orders for him to go, David is forced to confess to Millie that he is a jumper. When Millie realizes that David has abilities, she is horrified and flees. They both teleport to Griffin's hiding place as David grabs her, sensing that danger is approaching. When Roland and the other Paladins arrive at Millie's apartment, they discover it to be empty, but Roland discovers a jump scar. When they remove a device and place it beneath the jump scar, a portal begins to appear in an attempt to follow David. They are trying to reopen the jump scar. Griffin and David meet, and Griffin is furious that Millie is there. David tells Griffin about the Paladin's machine, and he warns him that taking Millie to the hideout will only make the Paladins find them. When David and Griffin visit the jump scar, they notice that it is growing bigger. Roland appears a few seconds later. While David and Griffin are hiding, he notices a photo of Mary among the recognized Paladins on Griffin's wall. After that, an electrified cable is used to tag David, and he is pinned to the wall. Griffin enters with a flamethrower in his hand, and the two then engage in combat, with Griffin using his teleportation skills to obtain the upper hand. Using the Paladin's technology, Roland puts up a strong fight as well. After punching Roland out of the hiding place, Griffin teleports away, but he comes back carrying a running bus that is headed straight for Roland. Despite having little time to react, Roland avoids the approaching bus. As Millie attempts to release David, who is tied to a wall, Roland seems prepared to kill her. Millie remains motionless until Griffin reappears brandishing the flamethrower and throws Roland back into the jump scar. Griffin leaps to his aid, and the fight carries on. When Roland and Griffin return to Millie's apartment after successfully freeing David back in the hideout, Millie informs him she wants to go home. David gives in since he has no other option, with the intention of bringing Millie back. Griffin makes a successful return with the technology of the Paladins. However, the Paladins are still able to throw a cable, capture Millie, and bring her back to the apartment while the jump scar is still active. Griffin gets ready to detonate a bomb, but David wants to save Millie. Griffin explains to David that this is his opportunity to finally put a stop to the Paladins. He plans to use the explosives to transport himself to the apartment. David objects and uses the bomb to teleport away. Griffin pursues him, and the two end up teleporting through numerous locales while fighting for the remote detonator of the bomb. Griffin eventually obtains the detonator. Griffin, though, is blind to the fact that a tall structure is falling onto them. Griffin is teleported inside the building by David, who then allows an enormous quantity of energy to grab him. He makes an attempt to get away, but the pylon is too sturdy to be broken through. Griffin makes an effort to talk David out of going back to the flat, claiming he can't compete with 5 Paladins, but David is committed to saving Millie. When David arrives back at the apartment and sees Millie, the 5 electrified cables that the Paladins had anchored to the apartment sting him right away. David tries to disappear by teleporting, but because he's connected to his apartment, the whole place shakes when he tries. Eventually, he manages to teleport the entire apartment to the lake where he first found his powers. Some of the Paladins drown, and most of them are unable to fight anymore. David moves the apartment back to the library. When he wakes up, he finds Roland is still alive. Then, David takes Roland and leaves him in the middle of the Grand Canyon. Later, David finds his mother, Mary. When Mary's daughter opens the door, David and Mary talk. Mary tells David she's also a Paladin. She explains she had to leave him when he first teleported at age 5 to protect him from other Paladins. David wonders what comes next. Mary says she'll give him an advantage. The movie ends with David accepted by Millie, teleporting away, ready to face challenges together. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next video.